Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of Liga. Mark here with you fine feathered individuals post Swiss stage debrief breakdown, whatever you want to call it. But of course, we have to look at the two, I'll call them bottoming outs of the Swiss stage to varying degrees, and the most flamboyant of bottom outs goes to the boys from FlyQuest, who kind of looked like after the G2 series, the tilt was setting in, and they have control against CFO in game one until a little quad Talia mishap, and then the tilt fully took over the bodies of all five members of this squad. All the hype, all the lead up, best in the West all year that we had, and to exit the World Championship this way feels a little bad.
We warned them and everybody else all year round that the bar, the requirements to make it to the knockouts, to be a top 8 team in the world, was going to be against CFO and the LCP. You had to know that that is the limit. Now, that is absolutely where you are going to be tested if you are good enough to make it on through. And the flat answer for FlyQuest in this series, performance, whatever, all sorts of things to it on the day, in the single instance where you had, again, the opportunity to prove that you can put yourself above CFO and the LCP, the LTA's greatest team could not do so on the day, failing not even an 07 being given out for these guys. The performance that came through, and I think, again, as you pointed out, really seemed done and dusted and tilted off the earth from the G2 matchup, where it really was a situation where I think a lot of LTA fans and myself were looking at, okay, yes, that is a disappointment. Yes, you can check out. Sure, that is a possibility. But how could you check out and, not be engaged at this point after that series? You should be reinvigorated, refocused to go, okay, let's buckle down. Let's secure our spot. Let's lock in and get this done and prove that this isn't the performance that we are giving out. Instead, it's the doubling down. It is more of those problems. It is an absolute implosion of the FlyQuest team on and off the rift.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a tale as old as time. The dominant NA team comes in, probably gets beat up in scrimps. The mental goes off a cliff. You see it on stage. They lose maybe a match they should win, and then it's over. It's completely tilt fest, and you have to look no further than after the game when you see CFO coming out and winning, and Rest says, driver, come on down, buddy. You got to be here with us for the bow. And then Inspired and the boys. Inspired cannot get away from Bwipo quick enough. He doesn't touch any of his teammates, and he is off the stage as fast as possible. It was the two ends of the spectrum, seeing those two teams address the crowd.
And one of those ones where it is, you know what, at the end of the day, understanding the power dynamics, the player that he is, the aspirations, understandable. Sure, that's one category to throw it into. But at the same time, my expectations, what is put forth as a professional when you are representing a region, your organization, all sorts of things like that. Bro, check it aside for 5 more seconds. Do it off stage or whatever. You have to find a way to put forth that public, persona, that image, whatever, even if it is fake to however much of a degree. I think that was certainly a miss on a professional level from Inspired in the way that he conducted himself, regardless of the way the performances and all the feelings that will be associated with that. Because, yes, I think that is certainly going to be a very serious conversation that needs to be had is, what is his motivation for next year? What is he possibly going to be motivated or convinced to stay with FlyQuest? This is a player that we know is a top-tier option within the world. Never mind the Western scene itself. He is one of the guys that is capable of being a difference maker on the international stage. Big problem is we didn't have any difference making, any changes on the international stage from him this year, despite getting, I think, the recognition and put forth that he hasn't gotten in previous years in his career.
And maybe the craziest part of this whole thing, it's not unbelievable that FlyQuest didn't make top 8. It's disappointing to go out getting absolutely slapped in game 2 by Doggo's Draven, who absolutely put him to it. But the bigger surprise is now you're left this event going, Weren't 100 Thieves the better performing LTA team? Even with a worse record, the journey, the path that they had against actual top tier competition where FlyQuest had a pretty easy path, not a single LCK matchup and no LPL, and seeing 100 Thieves even push a T1. They got swept, but pushing them and making them uncomfortable. I don't think anyone's leaving this event saying FlyQuest was better than 100 Thieves.
Had a hell of a lot more fight in them than this 100 Thieves team showed throughout the event. The courage, the heart. Yes, you can question all of those for this FlyQuest team and things that you can find within that 100 Thieves run and what they put out there. It's extremely disappointing, and especially when you're looking at, again, the schedules that both of these teams laid out. 100 Thieves taking all the bullets for the LTA, and it's a FlyQuest that can't cash in on any of these opportune draws that they did have. Again, yes, you got beaten head-to-head with G2. That's a favorable draw. You got beaten head-to-head CFO. That's a favorable draw. We can go even further within the Swiss stage, and there still are areas where it is good for FlyQuest. This is just flat out a complete under-delivery for the LTA scene, and really one of these ones that, again, adds to a long list of disappointments and things to go through. But I think this one, especially with how good and how high this team had climbed, to flunder and flounder out the way that they did here at the event, absolutely is one of the top tier of disappointments we have seen within the region.
Yeah, and now looking forward, that's basically 2 years with only one roster change and a year and a half with Quad in at the mid lane. Got to imagine bare minimum.
Whippo
and Quad are out.
You cannot.
No. This team's getting blown up for sure. I think you prioritize keeping Masu and Busio. That's still, young players, domestic players that you can build a team around. I don't think Inspired's going to want anything to do with this team or organization going forward. And yeah, the solo lanes at a bare minimum are going to be changing next year. But Inspired's a free agent, and there's going to be a lot of teams that he can pick up the phone and answer a call for.
You're right in identifying that the priority has to be the bottom lane. Looking at Masu and Busio, that is where you spend your resources, your effort, your time, your energy to maintain and secure that one and keep building moving forward. I think it's absolutely one where you would welcome Inspired back. That is the type of talent that he still gives all the asterisks and all the mess that has happened here. You would still welcome him back if he wanted to and was interested with what options you can provide within the mid lane and the top lane that you're going to go towards. I don't know if there are any real answers that FlyQuest can come up with that will convince Inspired the way things have gone this year to run it back with the squad. So that's why I don't think you invest your time, your resources, your energy in him coming back. I think you start preparing contingency plans. If he is not interested in wanting to move forward, that you still have to move and find a replacement in that position. This is crazy world for FlyQuest. I would have given about a 1 in 10 chance that 100 Thieves would have outdone them at the World Championship, and that more so was to do with how good and complete FlyQuest had shown us to be all year round. Nothing against 100 Thieves. And look at where we are now at the way things have played out here in the Swiss stage.
And based on interviews throughout this event, it sounds like Whippo knew he was probably out almost before this tournament even began. But yeah, Inspired, EU or NA, probably he's going to be the biggest free agent domino to fall as we head towards 2026. Not to be outdone by FlyQuest. That was incredibly disappointing, but the expectations were never winning the event for FlyQuest, right? Nobody was expecting that. When you're the first seed from the LPL, those are the aspirations. When you have probably the second best player in the world at the moment coming into this event in night, those are the expectations. But that first seed curse plagues BLG again. And to me, this is worse than 2017 EDG. This is worse than 2015 LGD. At least EDG had T1 in their group. At least LGD had a group of death. BLG didn't have to play a single LCK team. They had Western teams all the way, and the combined record of the teams that they did beat at this event were 1-6. 1-6!
We're talking FPX. We're talking top esports type of territory here. It may be, again, worse. I'm feeling like this is the LTA equivalent for the LPL right here with what has gone down for BLG. This is a titanic disappointment from the squad, and absolutely one that I think, again, could see the signs, could make some predictions, but you could have been fooled, could have been convinced after the performances that you saw throughout the summer split from this BLG team that we would see the championship caliber BLG return at the World Championship, be one of these threats that is lurking and waiting to take somebody out. They weren't a threat to anybody but themselves out there on Summoner's Rift, the way that they were making their plays, making some of these choices, and the execution across the Rift. It's one thing when the team doesn't play up to that level. That's okay. That's one thing that you can, digest and really work through and solve through. When you have the skill gap in individual players that this team has, and you're not able to come away with a better record at this point with the matches that you've had, that's a problem for one of the LPL's greatest teams that we have seen. That is absolutely a titanic problem, and one that sinks this team this year at Worlds.
And I know people are going to say, yeah, but it was an all-LPL qualification. That's a tough matchup to go against the finals rematch. Yeah, okay. Well, Top Esports, their 2 losses were at least to LCK teams in KT and an absolutely locked-in Gen.G. BLG's losing to 100 Thieves and G2 Esports, only Western teams, and they looked shaky throughout this event. We were waiting for them to come online. It didn't happen against Keedstar, where they were botching top lane dives and people just dying. This team, the uncharacteristic mechanical mistakes out of pretty much everybody on this roster, Knight and Elk were at least close to their normal selves throughout this event. But what we got out of Bin, the jungle, on the Beishuan Shadow honeymoon phase was fully over. There were so many issues with BLG. They just never seemed locked in until some of these team fights against Top Esports. But TES were up to the task on the day.
And it was pretty clear that I think at the end of the day, and what we, the final statement will be about this BLG team, is never figuring out the jungle position, what his role was going to be within the team, and how you would help facilitate things to that maximum level and preference. Never figured it out. It really was simply just that honeymoon. It was, there's a new, fresh look in here, and at this point for this game, and we're rolling through with that one. There was anything else more behind the magic that was going on with those moves and with that roster swap. Didn't happen. It was fool's gold to believe in a BLG being a championship tier team. Here they are, finding themselves on the wayside, looking on as everyone else is moving on to the knockout stage.
And that game 3 for TES, even subbing Beishuan in, kind of screams, oh, you're just doing this for the sake of doing it, for something new. Even though we had a decent early game, it kind of felt like, you sit and watch game 2, you go, okay, here's my early game pathing, here's my path, here's what I'm going to do. And then after 15 minutes, what's the plan? Well, I don't know. Hopefully we close out the game by then.
Yeah, that was certainly not the look that you needed to see. And again, against a team like Top Esports that has the ability to check you on the hands, whatever the hands were at this point for BLG. But then on top of that, having an actual plan, having an actual, order and an execution on that, followed up by the 5 members. That is clearly something that wasn't there at all for this BLG team. And they were left struggling throughout the entirety of this event, despite probably the most fortunate of draws that we have ever seen from an LPL team.
Especially, a top seed getting so easy. But, much like FlyQuest, it's kind of the second year with this roster, just a jungle change that really didn't work out. You got to imagine this thing's being blown up too, because we know the budget and salary for guys like Knight, Bin, and now Elk, who's kind of, set himself as a premier AD carry. Ain't no way this core is sticking together again.
No, way too expensive, and especially knowing, Knight has certainly been very much so a mercenary type of guy within the LPL, not looking to stay anywhere too long, looking for the best
He's looking
opportunities.
To win.
Absolutely. And so that's certainly going to be one of those ones that I'd be looking at him, looking for a different place. And yes, the finances of it all is always going to be one of those things. And to run BLG like this 2 years in a row, and especially not capitalizing with World Championship with actual titles on top of it, yes, this is going to be a BLG that is going to look very different come next year.
Low key, I just want to make things insane. Give me Knight as like the first LCK import coming into the mid lane, just to make the mid lane gauntlet in Korea even scarier.
Yeah, as if we've got enough of the challenge breaking on through, talking through about 4 or 5 legendary generational mid laners within the LCK. Yeah, sure. Come on, join the pool party over here, Knight.
All of a sudden, Nongshim's a top tier team with Knight over there. But yeah, I imagine maybe BLG prioritizes keeping Knight, and we see the majority of the roster move around him. But there's, especially with how things played out here, there's no way BLG doesn't make some sweeping changes heading into 2026, which will only make probably this offseason even more insane. This offseason maybe also going to be highly implicated by one of the quarterfinal matchups, because some way, somehow, we have a quarterfinal matchup that is the rematch of the LCK Summer Finals. Gen.G and Hanwha seemed like, a very common matchup that would probably happen at some point, but in quarterfinals, that just seems crazy.
You envisioned it in semifinals for sure, and possibly you thought, okay, maybe it might be the full deal, the final of them all. Quarterfinals, check in, lock in. Here we go, facing down these LCK foes, Hanwha Life and Gen.G. Very much so looking forward to this matchup. I think Gen.G really showed what you wanted to see from Gen.G at this event as they move forward to the knockout stage, to this quarterfinals matchup. And I think the same more or less can be said for this Hanwha Life team that has shown a little glimpse of the Peanut Last Dance buff on this team, but as well seeing some good signs from Zeka in the mid lane, and Viper, of course, being that damage engine in the bottom lane, and some of the picks that are going around for ADCs right now. You'd be feeling pretty comfortable if you are Hanwha Life as well.
And of course, we can't forget it. Like, it didn't go to Game 5 in the Summer Finals, but it was an insane Game 4 where Ruler was stealing multiple objectives. Hanwha was in control for a lot of it, very back and forth. A tightly contested series between these two, which is why it's sad to see him here in quarters, because whoever wins going to be the overall tournament favorite going forward, and whoever loses, you're like blowing up this roster and you're calling it a disappointing year to end at this point, and it's mainly because of a brutal matchup for top 8.
It's the unfortunate reality, and it's going to have to be one of those ones where it simply is looking back in hindsight and understanding the layout of the event and how things worked out to get to this point. Because yes, otherwise you're looking at this year and saying, one of Hanwha Life and Gen.G ended in quarterfinals. This roster, really? Yeah, this roster really, because this is the head-to-head that you are going to get here at this point. Certainly one I think even the tournament organizers would slyly say they would have hoped to have maybe a little bit later in the event, but when we are going to get this throwdown now, and I like you pointing out that, yes, we've seen this throwdown quite a bit in the LCK this year, and it has gone both ways all the way through this year. And I think early on, very much so, that Hanwha Life flavor of where the dominance was in the LCK, and especially towards the end of the year, and when Ruler really started to become a factor and really gel and make his reinsertion for this lineup and to this team to the level that Ruler is capable of, that's when the Gen.G team started to really dominate and take over. And that's why I would give them the favor, the edge heading towards this series. I still would not count out Hanwha Life by any means, but I'd be looking that they need to find someone else. Peanut, Zeus, Zeka, they need to be the guys that create a difference on their end so that you are counteracting what I think is going to be that slight edge, slight advantage towards the way Ruler is utilized and is performing right now for Gen.G.
Gen.G has got to see BLG out, T1 still not in peak form, and say, yeah, this is it. This is our tournament. This is our rank. Even with drawing Hanwha quarters, they have to have that T1 mentality where it doesn't matter who we draw. We can beat anyone at this event. It doesn't matter when we play them. We'll have to beat them eventually. Beat them now. Fine. And this matchup, obviously, it's going to be the first quarterfinal to go. So we'll dive deeper into the other matchups. But this heavy hitter does make for some spicy matchups otherwise, because you have stuff like CFO KT, where I'm sitting here going, man, aren't CFO the favorites here to be going top 4 at this event?
I think that's the craziest thing about it, is you can kind of find two of these quarterfinal matchups that are ones that you would assume to be semifinals type of matchups, with the drama, with the stakes that will be there for them. And then you're looking at these other two quarterfinals, specifically the ones that G2 and CFO have, and you're looking at opportunity. Not to say anything or to overlook who their opponent is on the day. Everybody in quarterfinals is the real deal. There's no FlyQuest here, guys. It's the real deal. You got to be prepared. But when you're talking about these matchups, it absolutely is, out of all the teams that were available, the favored ones for CFO and for G2, ones that they can dig their teeth into, dig down and get into the mud for this matchup and really fight your way out into that semifinals. But man, it's setting up pretty good if you're both CFO and G2 looking at those matchups and saying, look, we get through this, we're into whole new world territory talking about semifinals.
And I think what you're seeing in this quarterfinals is maybe one of the most evenly matched matchups across the board because, you know, if G2 draws Gen.G, well, you're going, yeah, Gen.G's a massive favorite there. Gen.G Hanwha, a little closer. G2 Top Esports, a little bit closer. And even T1 AL, the other one that does feel like a semifinals matchup. How about AL being, you know, the first team through rewarded with the T1 matchup? But T1 has definitely not leveled up to that LPL beater World Championship form yet. So through this tournament, AL should be the favorites right now in that one.
Everybody else knows more or less what they're getting served for dinner. You know, the waiter's putting in front of them. They're lifting off the big fancy tray, and they're going, this is just what I expected to be eaten tonight. This is great. Anyone's Legend is left with the mystery dish. They have no clue what the waiter is going to lift out on here. It could be, you know, this fine, freshly cooked lobster, or it could be an alive lobster looking to pinch their nose off under there with T1. You never know at this point what type of power level it could be. But I think if you are Anyone's Legend, and again, if you, like a Gen.G, believe you are a championship caliber team, you welcome this type of challenge and opportunity. Just as Gen.G is saying, all right, we would have had to face a team like Hanwha Life at some point. Let's buckle down and get it done here right now. Eliminate one of our competitors at this event and keep moving on. If you're Anyone's Legend, you better have that type of attitude of going, all right, let's get some revenge for MSI. It's time to really deal some damage to the LCK. Let's knock out T1 for the LPL.
The quickest path to making a legacy for yourself is beating T1 in an elimination match, best of 5 at the World Championship. That is the quickest path to transcendence for a guy like Tarzan and the rest of the squad. So yeah, very curious what level T1 shows up, because they're going to have to be at a very high level to compete with what AL is cooking right now as the main savior of the LPL. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, absolute beauties. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch you on that flippity flip.